Have you ever wished you could eavesdrop on a conversation with a millionaire? My name is Michelle Thompson. I'm a retired project controls engineer and business professor, and that's exactly what I'm going to do in this podcast. I get to ask the questions that everyone else wishes they could. I'm going to find out exactly how they were able to build their empires through automation and outsourcing. And I'm going to break it down in a way that helps you build your business to run on autopilot. Don't miss out on Automate to Dominate. All right. Hello, everybody. And today we have Amazon #1 best-selling author, investor, and dreamcatcher, John Bourgeois on the show. John, welcome, and thanks for taking the time to chat today.
Thank you, Michelle, for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be with you.
Oh my gosh, it's a pleasure. I was so excited I got to interview you. Can you tell all of our listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So, where do I begin? So I grew up on a little island in the middle of the Pacific called Guam. That's a fun fact. I spent 15 years, before we even do that, I went over to Australia. I spent 7 years in Australia, 5 years in Southern California, and now I'm based out of Seattle. I've been here for about 5 years or so. My background is I spent 15 years in the corporate world. 7 of those 15 years, I was also in the sales world, and I climbed the corporate ladder. I got really good at climbing the corporate ladder. In fact, at one point, I was overseeing 5 states, 297 locations.
Wow.
And the truth is, Michelle, I just wasn't happy. I was absolutely upset with myself and disgusted. And the reason why was because for about 10 years, I had pushed off a dream of being an international New York Times best-selling author. That's who I am. I'm an international New York Times best-selling author. Now, I'm not yet, but that's where I'm going, right? And I had pushed
Amazon
off
#1 bestseller is a good start.
It's close. That's right.
It's close. It's getting there.
But it's getting there. Exactly. But what happened was I for a decade, I believed, the limiting beliefs that was happening in my head. Everybody else was telling me, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. And I kept pushing it off and just climbing the corporate ladder. And so finally I made the decision, enough's enough. I'm tired of pushing off the dream. And I made the decision to jump and actually start to catch it. And so what happened was, what initially just was me wanting to write a book evolved into this amazing experience where now I've built a community of dream catchers. And the podcast got launched from it, where we're tired of just chasing our dream. We're actually ready to start catching it. And so, yeah, that's what brought us here today.
So no more dream boards. You're going to go get the dream.
That's exactly correct. Yeah.
Right. So how exactly were you able to leave the corporate industry successfully? A lot of people try and just, fall flat on their face. What tips could you give our listeners to make the plunge? How do you do it successfully?
So I'm a massive studier of the game. When I mean the game of life, right? Mm-hmm. And you hear the cliche of when, if you want to do something that successful people have done, then you have to literally learn what they've done, right? And you'll also always hear them say, like, anybody that you talk to that's ultra successful, they'll be like, have no plan B. And that can be extremely scary, but it's what you need. And Alexander the Great, one of the times when he was taking a actual, he brought his men over on the ships, and they were taking this town that had been for a while a siege that they hadn't been able to get to. He made the decision to burn all of his boats. And the thing that he said to his men were, listen, we either die here or we go back home on their boats. There was no other option. And so for me, to give you an understanding of what actually finally made me go, enough's enough, was I had the car, I had the house, I had the kids, I had the money in the bank, I had the credit score, I had all of that. I had the relationship. I had a 13-year relationship. And all of it in a matter of moments was gone. My 13-year relationship ended. I no longer had the car. I no longer had the house. I no longer had the title. I no longer had the funds in the bank. And now I found myself in a 750 square foot apartment, no furniture, no bed. I slept on the bedroom floor for 8 months. Wow. Trying to discover, who am I? I don't know anymore. I thought I knew who I was, but I don't know now. And I ended up, walking down the aisle. Fast forward, my grandfather dies, and I'm walking down the aisle and I'm looking at his tin, and he's got the blue ribbon wrapped around it. And I made the decision, now, if you're going to get your dreams, are you going to wait to the end of your life and it never happened, or are you going to make it happen now? And so I actually made a decision, going back to your original question, I actually made a decision, enough's enough. And I cut it off and I walked away from the corporate world immediately. In fact, well, the truth is I took a quote unquote 2-week vacation that was scheduled on the books. And I came back and I said, I won't be working anymore. So yeah.
Yeah. So is that kind of how The Pen and Its Author was born? Tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah. So The Pen and Its Author was actually, I was writing it while I was in the corporate world, and my grandfather passed away, and that's where you had that moment of, I've got to do this. In fact, my grandmother, who is an idol that I look up to, she was an English professor, but she was an author, right? But she never published any of her work, and she wanted to be an author, but she had to feed the family and she had to do this. And back in those days, like for her, like being a female author wasn't really the thing that you were known for, right?
Pretty much would need a pseudonym, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so what happened was, she died in 96, and about 15 years later, we finally published her work. So we had that going on. We had my grandfather passing away, and we had my 13-year relationship ending. And it really was just the catalyst for me. That was the decision of, I've got to do this. And so I made the decision that I don't care where you're at, John, what you're doing in your life, work in the corporate world or not, you're going to consistently write for 20 minutes every single day. And so I started writing for 20 minutes every single day. And when I made the decision to finally walk away, the beautiful thing was the book was almost finished. It wasn't done, but I had consistently established this habit of, we are a writer and we do this consistently. And now my confidence piece was there. And it was like, no, now I trust you, because, 10 years prior, Michelle, the problem that I had was I would not keep my own boundary lines. I would erase my boundaries based on what you asked of me. So if you said, hey, can we show up to the coffee shop at 12? I'm going to look at my calendar and I'm going to be like, well, I got that meeting. I was supposed to be doing this. You know what? 12 works perfectly. Let's do 12. That's awesome, because I was the guy that always wanted to make everybody happy. And so I didn't trust myself. And so it started with me first doing what I like to call, when I talk with my clients, it's collecting small wins. It's collecting the type of things that stack the deck in your favor, that are easy to do, like waking up on time. Like you said you were going to go to the gym. In my case, it was, you said that you're going to write every single day for 20 minutes. Are you going to do it or not? And so when I started to do that, when the book started to come together, it was like, I can do this. And that's where The Pen and Its Author was birthed from, an idea, but it was more birthed from the consistent effort of me making the decision, I'm going to show up no matter what.
And I think that's such an incredible, just golden nugget of wisdom. So many people are just ready to just hop out of their job and, throw some spaghetti against the wall and hope it works, right? And if you haven't done those small steps to make yourself accountable before, what makes you think that you're going to do it when you don't have a job and you can sleep till noon and do whatever you want, right?
Oh, absolutely. Here's what, if I'm going to be utterly honest with you, right? my schedule now as an author, a top-rated podcaster, I am an investor. I've got multiple hats that I'm wearing elsewhere as well. Other partnerships that I'm doing and building out, like all of that stuff. My schedule is now more busy. I wake up. This is not what you're going to want to hear, anybody that's listening, right? I wake up at 1:30 most days, unless I just absolutely crashed and my body's saying, hey, John, we need to recover. I wake up at most days at 1:30 and I work probably. So my mornings look like this. I wake up at 1:30. I spend 5 minutes just breathing. I spend 5 minutes in gratitude and just being thankful. Sometimes those will extend to 10 minutes on the gratitude, because I love being like, I've learned to be thankful. And so sometimes I'll extend that. Then I spend 5 minutes visualizing money and wealth and financial prosperity. Wow, that word didn't want to come out. And then I spend 5 minutes on the future and visualizing the future. Then I go from there to my journal, and I'm writing out my top 10 goals that I've got set for me. I'm writing out the 3 things that I'm grateful for from the 24 hours before. And then I'm writing out, and this was a game changer for me. When I was in that 750 square foot apartment, I hated myself. I didn't know who I was. I had all these limiting beliefs and all this hatred towards myself, because I had never been the individual that kept my promises to myself. And I established a habit then that I've carried to today, which is I now write out, I am, and back then I wrote it out feeling the opposite of how I was. So if I felt sad, I'm happy, I'm energetic. That's what I was writing out. Now I write out, I'm confident, I'm full of energy, I'm full of abundance, I make a difference, I'm an international New York Times best-selling author, I'm influential, I'm inspirational. Like, I write out all those things and I feel those things. Then I go into 20 minutes, 45 minutes of reading. And then after I'm done with that, it's working. And I'm working until maybe 5:30, 6:30. And then I'm spending some time with the family, and I'm in bed at 9:30. Like, if you can't keep a structure like that at the job that you're at, 9 to 5, then guys, I'm going to tell you, when you step out of the 9 to 5, you're going to think Netflix and waking up at 12 o'clock is what it is, and you expect to make a difference in this world. You won't. I'm going to be honest with you. You won't. So.
Yep. It's so true. You know, people think they're going to leave and it's going to be like awesome. And it's so much harder than when you had a job, but you know, you have this dream, and so it fuels you and it energizes you and it just makes you want to keep going. And so the journey is absolutely worth it. I'm not knocking, you know, the journey, but some people who have this like grand illusion that, you know, it's all fun and games, it just doesn't exist. It's just not real.
Yeah, so. Absolutely.
So tell us the basic plot of The Pen and Its Author.
Of course.
Give us a little sneak peek.
So it is myself. It is a father that's passed away, and the eldest son finds himself on the day of his father's funeral just lamenting over his father and missing his dad. And he's given a set of letters from the father. And so you are walking through the journey of the son as he begins to read his father's letters, and he begins to learn, how do I do what my father did, which was, how do I turn my dreams into reality? And so you're going through that journey with the son as he's doing that. And so what I wanted to do with the book, have you read The Alchemist, Michelle?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So The Alchemist is one of my favorite books. Like, The Alchemist, I read every single year. It's one of my favorite books. What I wanted to do was I wanted to take fiction and nonfiction and marry them together so that you could easily read this, and yet you could get life principles right from it. And so that's exactly what I did with this. I want to teach, not only do I want to teach my kids how to catch their dreams, but I want to go back in time and teach myself 10 years ago how to catch my dreams. And then I want to go ahead and I want to teach every one of my dream catchers how to catch their dreams and how to turn their dreams into a reality. And so that was the premise of the book.
And that's such a incredible way to do it. I think we learn so well by stories. Like I
absolutely.
When you said that, one of the very first things that popped in my head was The Go-Giver.
Yeah.
Is it Bob Burke? Is that who wrote The Go-Giver?
I think it is. I haven't read that book, but the fact that I keep hearing it means I need to read it. Like everybody keeps talking about it means I need to read it.
The Go-Giver is an amazing book. I would highly recommend it. And it's a super easy read because it's a story. Like you get drawn into the characters and you don't even realize you're learning all these principles that are like so amazing because you're just enjoying the book. So that is awesome that you were able to take the, idea of how do we catch our dreams and like put it in parable story form. So it's so easy for somebody to just relate. That's, is that how the Dreamcatcher culture started? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so that's the funny thing. So I never wanted to be a podcaster. It wasn't the thing that was on my radar. I listened to a lot of podcasts. I watched a lot of like YouTubes of your Ed Milet's, your Les Brown, your Tony Robbins. Like that's what I did, right? I listened to their podcasts. I watched their YouTube. That's how, in a world where you don't know where to find your mentors, the beautiful thing about 2020 is we have technology at our fingertips. We can choose whether we want to or not. We can choose to binge watch the newest season of This Is Us and Heroes. I'm dating myself a little bit, and Heroes. Or what we can do is we can choose to take that exact same amount of time and surround ourselves with mentors that maybe don't even know that you're your mentor, but you're allowing them to listen. And so I wrote my book, I finished my book, and then I went, well, what do we do now? Like I've written my book, well, I've got to sell it. So I know that. Okay. Man, I really wish that I had a community of people that were go-getters like me, high achievers that were turning their dreams into reality. I wish I could find that community. You know what? I actually wish that I could learn from other high achievers, go-getters, people that were turning their dreams into reality. What if I had a podcast? Because that would do all of them. That would allow me selfishly to spend an hour with one of my mentors and get to learn directly from them and build a relationship. On top of that, that would allow me to network with other dream catchers and be able to help build their dreams. And oh my goodness, I could also go ahead and I could talk to my 10-year younger self and say, John, you don't have to wait until everything is right. There is never going to be a perfect time for you to start your dream. Just start it now. And so that's where it came out of. And it literally, the Dreamcatcher show came directly out of the heart of, I'm going to see 1 billion dream catchers catch their dreams.
That's amazing.
And that's where it came from.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, even though you didn't mean to be the podcast guy, you've got like an amazing top 200 podcast.
Yeah.
How did you do that? How did you grow it?
Yeah. So I did a couple of things. One, I did not get comfortable, right? You got to understand, before I wrote a book, I didn't know how to write a book. Like I had a bunch of ideas and I had started a bunch of books, but I didn't know how to write a book. And when I started my podcast, it was the exact same thing. In fact, I had learned a very valuable lesson from my book that I took away with my podcast. In fact, right now we are recording this podcast. The Dreamcatcher show has gotten to the top 200 Apple Podcasts off of an iPhone and a tripod.
Wow.
I hear that. Yes, exactly. You don't need no fancy setup. You don't need it looking exactly the way that you think it does. You don't need a studio manager. You don't need this. You don't need that. literally, I made the decision, John, it's not comfortable to start a podcast. And so I'm going to try to make it as perfect as possible. Wait, what if we just started now? We just went now.
Yep.
And so I took what I had and I started now. And so then the next step that I did was, it's not going to be comfortable to reaching out to guests and things like that. Like, it's not going to be comfortable at all. But I know that I'm building a community of dream catchers where we're tired of chasing our dreams and we're ready to start catching them. What if I started to reach out to people that I follow, that I don't even, like, I look up to them? What if I reached out to them on social media and I said, hey, Michelle, I love your stuff. You're so inspirational. You're amazing. Hey, I'm building a community of dream catchers, and I think you would bring tremendous amounts of value to them. Would you be open to being a guest on my podcast? Now that opens up a myriad of questions from them. What's a dream catcher? Da 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 da. And then that allows me to then tell them, well, our dream catcher is this. This is what a dream catcher is. It's a person that's tired of chasing, just daydreaming, and they're ready to start catching. Oh, I love that. I would love to be on your show. And so that got me to a certain level. And it got me in the circles of people that were definitely peers and dream catchers, and allowed me to start networking with people. The next step, though, in order to actually get to top rated, was I had to hire a coach. And I am a firm believer in a coach. I'll tell you a funny story. When I was a kid in high school, we had what was called the Presidential Award. And what that was you had to, like, be able to stretch a certain length. You had to be able to do so many push-ups, so many sit-ups. You had to be able to, like, jump a certain height. And the other thing was you had to be able to run a mile under 5 minutes. Well, that's extremely tough.
Right. Anybody who hasn't tried has no clue how hard that is.
Yeah. And so I kept getting to like 5 minutes and 30 seconds, 5 minutes and 15 seconds. And it sounds like that's easy, but 15 seconds is super hard as well. Mm-hmm. So I went to my soccer coach and I said, hey, listen, I only got one more chance at this before they close this up and I miss the opportunity. Will you run the last lap with me and shout at me like you shout at us at practice? And he's like, absolutely. I'll definitely do that. Sign me up. And so sure enough, I run. And on that last lap, when I'm tired, when I don't want to be doing it anymore, that's generally when we start to slow down, right? He's there and he kicks in and he runs alongside me, just shouting the entire way. And it just gives me the boost. And I learned back then that if you're really going to get the results that you want, you can definitely try on your own and keep hammering your head up against the wall. But the beautiful thing is a coach and a mentor is able to say, hey, John, you're hitting your head up against the wall there, but there's a door here. What if I showed you where the door was at and we were able to walk through that wall? And so that's what I did. I put my money where my mouth is. I hired a coach. And the coach, I picked a right coach that delivered on the results that he said he was going to deliver on and was doing the same thing on his own podcast and got the results. But I'll tell you this, it wasn't like he just carried me the entire way. So many people think, Michelle, like when they hire a coach, they're expecting that coach to lift the weight for them, to run the mile for them, to go ahead and, get the results for them. No, that's not what a coach is there for. I still had to put in all the effort and work behind. He gave me a playbook, literally a playbook, like 40 some pages or whatever. And I went through that thing and I ate it up like it was the best-selling novel. And I did literally line by line exactly what it told me to do. In fact, when I was going for top rated, I almost got kicked off of Facebook. Like Facebook was like, you need to stop messaging people. Like you just got to stop because you're doing it way too many, and we will kick you off and we will block you if you don't stop. And I was like, I don't know. Let's test this a little bit.
Totally gotten slapped. I've gotten my hand slapped by Facebook too.
Yeah.
You're sending the same message to way too many people way too quickly. That's never happened to us.
Yeah, never.
That's awesome. So at what point were you able to actually start monetizing your podcast?
So the funny thing is, I actually, I started from day one.
Really?
Yeah. And the reason I did, and so I'll explain this. The reason that I did is I think it's important. So I had people telling me different things in my ear, people that had already had podcasts and things like that. They were like, you don't monetize your podcast until years upon years upon years upon years upon years upon years. And I was like,
Well, I don't believe that, but
I can hear you on that. I can hear what you're saying. I understand why you want to bring value first. You want it to be free. You want to build credibility. You want the audience to know that you know what you're talking about. Okay, I understand that. But mentally, I knew that in order for me to continue to go after this, because podcasting is not a get rich quick scheme. Like anybody that's listening, you need to know that podcasting is more like a business card. It is a, hey, I've got a podcast, I'd love to have you on it, business card. It is a great place to network with other people and be able to have conversation. It is a great learning tool, but monetization doesn't generally occur until 1, 2, sometimes 3 years, just depending on your model. Mm-hmm. Well, for me, I knew time is important. My time is important. I'm not a billionaire or a trillionaire yet, but I know where I'm going. So I need to, even with the effort that I'm putting in now, I need to see some sort of payment. Anything. I have to see it mentally so that I know that I'm getting some sort of results from it. And so the platform that I'm on allows me to actually have different sponsorships. And you just do a recording for our company. And depending on how many people listen to it, you get paid. The funny thing is, like literally pennies on the dollar. Mm-hmm. But to answer your question, when did you start monetizing it? I started monetizing it from day one because I needed to remind myself your time is valuable. This is where you're going. If you want to be X, Y, and Z, then you better start acting like it today and not waiting until that someday happens. Start doing it now. Someday will come because you started doing it now.
Yep, that's great advice. And I'm actually the exact same line of thinking is, hey, mine, this particular podcast, Automate to Dominate, is all about, software and outsourcing and things like that. So you better believe I'm out there looking for sponsors who have software or outsourcing firms that, are looking to sponsor a podcast like this. And for our listeners that are thinking of this, because, we try to come up with multiple income streams. Like you said, this is not a get rich quick, right? It's little tiny deposits into the bank. And then those relationships that you build turn into, a opportunity, somewhere else. Sometimes you don't even see it. But yes, so if you're willing to put the work in, you absolutely can monetize it, but don't expect it overnight, which is
absolutely. And the sad thing is most podcasts, Michelle, I don't know if you've looked at the stats, but most podcasts will end around the 12th to 13th episode. And that's the reason why. They are expecting to capitalize on their podcast. They're expecting that, hey, you said you had a podcast. Like, sure, I'll throw you $1 million. Let me go ahead and give that to you right now. That's not how it works.
Right.
It's still branding. It's still you establishing yourself as a name. Like, it's still the long play. If you want a get rich quick scheme, go and figure out how to sell something and go work at a sales job. That's probably your best gig. Like, you're going to have to spend the time and the effort to make money. And I look at my podcast not as a cash cow. It's the long game. But I more look at it as the relationships that I've built. Yep. I more look at it as being able to connect with my mentors and stay connected with them after the fact. Like, all of those, I can't put a price tag on those.
Yeah, and you hit the nail right on the head. It's all about the long game, right? So many people think they're going to use and abuse their listeners for the short game and, get a whole bunch of money and then walk away. And, you can't build a lasting business like that. It's all about giving back, and it's all about how much value do you bring for people. And then that when you start giving more value than, you could possibly take, that's when it starts to monetize itself and make it worth it.
Absolutely.
People have that so backwards.
No, and that's 100% correct. Like, here's the thing that you got to realize, right? First off, and I learned this from my relationship breaking up. I was looking at a relationship and accomplishments as defining myself. Like, I was looking for somebody else to love me in order to feel loved. You need to know your own value before you ask anybody else to value you. And so what's happened since the relationship broke up, the 3 years of long depression, me sleeping on that floor, and where you're seeing me today is I know who I am now. Like, it's a game changer. I'm night and day. And I decided, and I tell my clients this exact same thing, I decided to start hedging my bets on me. I walked away from the 9 to 5, the cushy paycheck, because I hedged my bets on me. I started my podcast because I hedged my bets on me. I launched my book because I hedged my bets on me. And you better believe that on my podcast, I then made my own commercial for my book, hedging my bets on me because I know my value now.
Yep, absolutely. And so many times we see the rosy colored picture, right? We see the end product, but we don't see the 3 years of sleeping on a floor, figuring out who we are, putting the time in, putting the work in. And the people that are really successful are the ones that are willing to do that and get down and dirty with themselves and say, okay, this is it. I'm betting on me. And how can I expect somebody to love me, to fulfill me? Like, what kind of a stipulation is that to put on somebody else? Like, how are you responsible for my happiness?
It's so true.
Yeah. And so,
but so many of us do it though. Like, I was,
and we don't even realize it.
Yeah. I was just having a conversation with my kids last night. They're getting to the phase where it's like, we want to talk about the boys that like us and the girls that like us. We want to talk about who so-and-so tried to kiss so-and-so. Like, that's all the talk, right? And we watched the movie and they were holding hands. Like, that's what it is, right? And I had to
at least you haven't got to spin the bottle yet.
Yeah, exactly. Not looking forward to that.
I bet.
Yeah. Yes, that's correct. I'm going to lock all the doors and board all the windows. That's what's going to happen.
You're like, I don't even have a gun, but I'm getting a shotgun.
Exactly. No, but we had a real conversation last night where it was, you don't get into a relationship. And this is even valuable for business. Because I did the exact same thing with businesses. I would get into partnerships with businesses, my idea, brilliant ideas. And then I would get into partnerships with somebody else that wasn't really involved and wasn't as gung-ho 120% behind the business. I would get into it because I was afraid that I didn't have enough value to bring to the table. So my business, of course, isn't going to work if I'm not valuable enough. So I got to bring this guy in, but they're not sold in, and they end up walking away from the business. And now I'm going, well, I can't do that. Earlier this month, I walked away from a potential partnership because I was watching the partner not be consistent in what he said he was going to do, the small things. And I said, listen, this isn't how we're working. If you want to work with me, you run at my speed. We go at the same speed. We do the same things that we said we're going to do, and that's how we deliver, because I now know who I am and I know how valuable I am. I was telling my kids, going back to that, like, don't get into a relationship. Don't get into marriage. Don't start having kids until you're healthy emotionally, financially, physically, mentally. Like, make sure that you are good first before you start looking at somebody else to make you feel good. That's the wrong way of doing things.
Yep. And you touched on something that I personally dealt with for a little while, and my coach had to call me out on it. He's like, Michelle, you've got the imposter syndrome. And I'm like, what the heck's the imposter syndrome? And he's like, you need to read this book. So he gave me this book called The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women by Valerie Young. And guys have the same thing. It's just this book happened to be written for women, but the imposter syndrome is exactly what you're talking about. Like, we have this amazing value that we're going to give, but we feel like we can't do it on our own. So we bring somebody in who's not all in, and then we give them part of our passion and our perfect, just because we don't feel like we're good enough to do it on our own. So if that's like resonating with anybody, I would highly recommend Google imposter syndrome and pick up a book and read it, because it will pivot the way that you think. And you absolutely need a pivot in your thinking to be successful. Exactly what John did.
And I'll tell you this, for me, I'll give you a very simple, if you're listening to this podcast and you're suffering with that right now, I'll give you a very simple exercise and a book that helped me get out of that imposter syndrome. You're a Badass. I read that every single year.
Yep.
And that helped me get out of my 3-year depression. But if you want a very simple walk away from this podcast right now and grab a pen and a piece of paper and start working on it today, this is what I would give you. I want you, and these are powerful words, what I'm about to tell you. Okay. So take this nugget. My clients pay me for this knowledge. So take this nugget that you're getting right now and actually apply it. Go and do it. I am. And then I want you to go ahead and feel how you're feeling. I talked about it earlier, but literally do it. Grab a pen and a piece of paper, feel how you're feeling first, and then start to write in the exact opposite. If you don't feel worthy, then write, I am worthy. If you don't feel valuable, write, I am valuable. If you don't feel rich, I am wealthy. If you don't feel like you're enough, I am enough. I want you to write on that page and write everything that is opposite of how you feel. Then I want you to pick that page up and I want you to read it to yourself. And then I want you to tomorrow do the exact same thing. And then the day after that, do the exact same thing. And then the day after that, do the exact same thing. You do that for 3 years, Michelle, you now are talking to an Amazon bestseller, a top-rated podcaster, an investor. Like, you're talking to somebody that has had to put in the work to get to where he's at today.
Yep. And it's so true. I have self-proclamations that I actually have taped when I'm brushing my teeth. I'm saying them every day, it's part of the routine. You brush your teeth and then you say those out loud, and it's incredible how empowering it is. And you don't think about it until somebody explained it to me this way. You're asking yourself the wrong questions.
Yep.
And you're like, what do you mean you're asking yourself the wrong questions? And, typically we tend to ask ourselves negative things and don't even realize it.
Of course.
And if you take that exact question, like, let me see if I can think of a really good example.
So a negative one would be like, why does this always happen to me? Why am I always a failure? Why do I always mess up? Why can't I ever do anything right? Like, those are all what Michelle's talking about when she's saying negative questions.
Yeah. Okay. Now pivot and give me the positive question to ask yourself instead.
What can I learn from this? How can I get better from this? How is this going to help me teach somebody else not to do this? Where is there opportunity in this situation that I can capitalize on? How do I make sure that next time I'm doing this, it doesn't happen the same way?
Yep. And if you guys grasp anything, grasp onto that, because your brain is amazing. It's constantly trying to find the answers that we want. So depending on the questions that you give it is the answers that you get. And you'll be subconsciously sleeping and you won't even realize that you're figuring out what you ask yourself. And then you wake up and it just changes your whole trajectory, which is like so powerful. So once you did that pivot, right? and you were able to take yourself back and start asking the positive things and doing, having all the belief in yourself, how did that transfer into, now I'm a better investor, now I'm a better author, now I'm a better dream catcher?
Yeah.
This is who I am, John, the dream catcher.
Yeah. So I would love to say that I pivoted and the next day I was different. No, not at all. It wasn't that way at all. And I don't want anybody to listen to this podcast and think that it was that way either, because that's not fair to think. Because you got to understand, I went through 3 years of depression and started writing my book 18 months ago. So there's a time gap between there that's like, okay, so you were in and out of not knowing who you were over that time. I knew what the problem was. I knew how to fix it. Now I had to consistently do something about it in order to fix it. And so to answer your question about like how that's helped me, you don't understand when you're asking, when you don't believe you're worthy enough, when you don't believe you're valuable enough, when you're asking the wrong questions as an investor, you can't walk into any deal, any opportunity with that being at the back of your mind, even if you don't realize it's at the back of your mind, because you always second guess yourself. And then even if you do get the deal, you won't get the deal that would have been valuable had you walked in and said, Michelle, here's how it's going to go. And this is what I'm bringing to the table. And these are my terms. And if it's not a win-win situation, then I'm not here to work with you, right? If I am still not thinking I'm valuable enough, not worthy enough, if I'm asking the wrong questions and I walk into that engagement and I'm giving you a win and I'm walking out with the deal, but I'm giving you the win and I'm actually losing in the deal. It's the same thing with writing. It's the same thing with podcasting. I would not have reached out to the guests that I reached out to and have had on the show and am having on the show if I did not know, hey, you don't know my name. I get that, but you will. Don't worry. You'll eventually know it. We'll eventually bump shoulders together and you'll be asking me for favors. I know that. And the same thing with my book. I wouldn't have written my book. My book stayed in the back of my bookshelf right here in my mind for 10 plus years because I was always the writer. I just didn't know I was who I was. Mm-hmm. And so I would believe anybody else if they told me, John, you're way too energetic. There's no way you can be a writer. Or if they told me, John, listen, nobody ever makes money at books. So why in the world would you want to write a book? Then I believed them because I didn't know who I was. I was asking the wrong questions. And it, like, to answer your question, like, it's night and day. Tony Robbins talks about, I believe it's called the reticular activating system. And basically it's your brain has so many stimuli that are being thrown at you on a daily basis. And what you don't realize is your brain is deleting a lot of the information that's being thrown at it. And it's deleting all that information and it's only keeping what you've told it to focus on. Well, the really cool thing is you can just shift night and day from your focus. You can choose, hey, I know I've got all the bills stacking up in the mailbox, but I've got this opportunity over here and I'm going to focus, instead of the bills, I'm going to focus on the opportunity. Instead of the car payment that's coming out on Tuesday, I'm going to focus on the fact that my paycheck comes in on Monday. It's the same situation, but you're teaching the brain, this is where we look, this is what we focus on. And when your brain realizes what it's supposed to be focusing on, it opens up and it starts to look for other situations where you are confident, where you are valuable, where you are worthy, where you are wealthy, where you are healthy. It starts to look for all of those additional areas to answer what you've told it or to answer the question that you've asked it. And so going back to your original question, I now see things that I probably wouldn't have seen both in writing, both in podcasting, both in investing, because of my confidence level being up. Because my brain goes, this guy means business. And when he says he's going to do something, he does it. So if he said he's going to do it, if he said he's going to be an international best-selling author, we better come up with the evidence that he is.
Yep. And for everybody out there who's listening, that is like, oh my gosh, I don't want to pay attention to this. Just show me how to make money. You're not going to make money until you get this.
Yeah.
Every successful person out there, if you study their traits, if you study the things that they've become good at, it's every single thing that John is talking about. It's all about mindset. And we're not talking about, being cocky or arrogant. That's not it at all. This is like a complete shift in, who you are as a person and your self-beliefs, and what you tell yourself subconsciously is what you get. And so until you fix that, the money's never going to come. And it's not all about money. Like success is like so many different things, right? And for me, it's definitely not all about the money. For a lot of people it is, right? I think, don't get me wrong, Tony Robbins makes a crap ton of money, right? And he's very well compensated for what he does. But his initial thing was he wanted to change lives.
Of course.
Right? And that's the thing that drives him, that motivates him. And it's the same for all of us. What is your superpower that you just don't necessarily believe in yourself yet? That's what you have to unlock.
And I'll give you a perfect example. I'm working with a businessman, and he's one of my clients. And I asked him to do an exercise where we basically wrote out his top 10 goals. But before we did that, we looked at like a best year from now. There was no obstacles, what we were able to do. And his personal life is just like in shambles right now. But all he wants to focus on is the revenue driver. Mm-hmm. But because he hasn't fixed the hidden closet, the personal life, because his brain right now doesn't believe in himself, doesn't matter what revenue he's going after, his brain doesn't believe he can do it.
Yep.
And we had to first start to collect those small wins, those things of, hey, you want to get your health in line. Let's stop focusing on how much money your business needs to bring in first. Like that will come. Don't worry. Like we can address that in a second, but let's put that on a pause. Let's go back and teach your brain, no, I am going to do what I said I was going to do. And no matter what, I'm going to do it, whether it's comfortable or not comfortable. So if I said I'm going to run a mile consistently every single day, I don't care if it's 11:45 p.m. I'm going to go and run the mile. Because what that starts to do is then it starts to go, John doesn't care, or this client doesn't care, what time of day, whether it's comfortable or not comfortable. Eating the frog is what they like to call it, right? Like, like doing the activity that you don't want to do. They're going to do it whether he does it or whether he enjoys it or not. He's just going to do it because he said he's going to do it. The really cool thing is when you train your brain to do that, then when you walk in and you're looking at the business, or you're trying to start the business, or you're trying to write the book, or you're trying to be a podcaster or anything like that, your brain goes, I'm confident in John or anybody else that's doing this. I'm confident in them. Now I can do the rest. And so in the case of my client, all he wants to focus on right now is the revenue. How do I make the money? 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 Well, if we don't get rid of the limiting beliefs that are up here, it doesn't matter how much money we put on the top line. Like let's say we were looking at a P&L. It doesn't matter how many money we put on the P&L up top. We're never going to be able to grow that bottom line. And in his case, it's a perfect example. He wants to hoard all of the responsibilities of the business and not grow any further because he's afraid that if he does that, they're not going to do the job that he wants, or he'll lose this client over there, or the month won't go the way. Well, that's not a business problem.
Right.
That's a mindset problem right up here. There's a fear of losing. There is a fear of scarcity. And that's what we have to change first before we change the business at all.
Yep. Absolutely. Man, we got way off topic, but this is
we
like
did,
so
but
good.
I loved it. I loved it. Yeah, it was
it's like
good.
So good. I have a bunch more questions, but I honestly don't know if I want to dive into them because this has been so awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you thinking? What are your thoughts? Tell me.
Yeah. So here's what I will say. I think we're in a perfect position right now. I want to share a couple of things. One, so let's go back to the pen and its author. I wrote that with a pen and a notebook.
No computer.
But I established the habit of writing 20 minutes every single day. I took what I had in my hand and I ran with it. And I did the best that I could. And then once I finished the book, then I figured out, okay, how do I get it to an editor? How do I go ahead and get a cover designer? How do I get a formatter? How do I get it on Amazon? How do I get it to be an Amazon bestseller? With my podcast, the Dreamcatcher Show, same thing. I started it with an iPhone, a tripod, and AirPods. And then I learned, how do I get guests? Then I learned, how do I record it? Then I learned, how do I upload it? Then I learned AirPods are not the best sound quality for podcast episodes. So the next question was, okay, well, how do I get a microphone that allows me to talk and move the way that I love to talk and move, but also is connected to an iPhone so that I can still use my iPhone the way that I enjoy using it at the moment? And I learned along the way. But again, going back to the principle, I took what was in my hand and I did the best with it. And then I learned along the way. Guys, if you're listening to Michelle's episode, that's what I want you to hear. Don't wait until everything is perfect before you automate. Don't wait before you start the business. Don't wait. Start where you're at. Start with what you've got. And then adjust and change along the way.
Yep. It's little baby steps every day, right?
That's right.
That turn into these huge monumental wins.
That's
right. And it's because you did the tiny, seemingly insignificant 20 minutes a day.
Yep.
And now you have your book.
Yeah.
And now you have your podcast. And now you have insert whatever your thing is here.
Exactly. And that's the funny thing is that the funny thing that you even mentioned that is actually how I started, right? I knew, okay, what do I want? Well, I want to be an international best-selling author. That's a very large, audacious dream. And if you say that to yourself way too many times, guess what? Your brain is going to say, John, you're not, and you're a liar. I don't believe you. Anything you say you're going to do, you're not going to do because that's way too large. So I had to break it down. Okay, well, I'm an author. No, you're not, John. You don't have a book on the shelf. What are you even talking about? We do not believe you, not one bit. Okay, got it. Well, I'm a writer. That one I can do consistently daily, and that one I can deliver on. And when you do exactly what Michelle just said, because I started with the big dream, and then I said, okay, but how do I break that down so my brain starts to believe me? Okay, I can't do that because that's way too large there. I can't be classified as an author because I haven't authored anything. Now I'm a writer. And then I just started to work on the things that I could control right then on my daily basis, working towards my goal. Now, guess what? Because I went from being consistently a writer, now I can say I'm an author.
Right.
And we'll just keep working until I'm able to finally say, Michelle, I'm an international New York Times best-selling author. My books are read across the globe. I inspire, I motivate, and I help others catch their dreams. Boom.
Boom. Drop the mic. So, all right, what about all the people that are out there that are listening to this and they're like, oh my gosh, I need to hire John because he gets it. I'm resonating with this. Are you taking coaching clients right now?
I am. So I open up coaching clients every 90 days or so. I like to work with my clients for 90 days. So if you're looking to find out, like, can I go ahead and work with you, John? The best way to do that would be go to any one of my social medias. It's going to be at John C. Bourgeois. Shoot me a Facebook message, shoot me a Instagram DM. And Michelle, for you, for the show notes, I'll even provide my email address if you want to shoot me over an email.
Awesome.
And you just want to I get a lot of emails on a regular basis. So if you just want to make it very simple, hey, John, I'm interested in being one of your clients, in the subject line, I will make sure that I respond back to it as quickly as possible. Or if you just want to send me a DM, like, go ahead and do that as well.
That's amazing. This has been far and beyond what I had originally anticipated when we first did this. Yes. Isn't that awesome when it just shows up and everything is like, the angels start singing. So everybody, make sure that you hit up John on Instagram. And in case you're not in front of a computer, I'm going to spell his Instagram thing so that you guys have it.
Yeah.
So it's at JOHNC, B as in boy, O as in ostrich, U as in umbrella, R as in Ralph, G as in George, E as in Edward, O as in ostrich, I as in iguana, S as in Sam. So guys, definitely John has been amazing. Check out his book, check out the Dreamcatcher podcast, hit him up on Facebook. This guy is a wealth of knowledge. And John, thank you so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And Michelle, I will say this, first and foremost, I want to say thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been a blast today. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
My pleasure.
And you guys need to subscribe to this show, rate this show, make sure that you're listening to what Michelle's bringing, because she's going to bring you phenomenal guests as well. On top of that, if you feel you're a dream catcher, or you feel like you've got a dream, you just don't know how to do it, or you're in the middle of your dream and you're like, gosh, man, it's a dark place right now. Is this really going to happen? Or you're really inspired by it, or you just wrapped up your dream and you're like, what's next? See me over at the Dreamcatcher Show. You can literally find me Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, literally any one of them. And if you want to hear my story told in a fable, get yourself over to Amazon and go ahead and buy the pen and its author. Right now, it's literally only 99 cents. We're doing a promotional launch. I don't know how long that's going to be, but go ahead and grab a copy of that as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all that information, and we will see you guys next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Automate to Dominate podcast at www.awesomeoutsourcing.com/podcast. My name is Michelle Thompson.